Captain Tersch leaned back in his chair, the creaking of the leather a gentle reminder of the countless butts that had sat here before him, probably equally doomed. The radiant dawn hummed around him, its systems purring like a content cat, oblivious to the cosmic litter box it was about to stumble into. A solar farm, they said. A chance to innovate, they said, he muttered, staring at the mess on the holo display in front of him. The bright, beautiful array of solar panels, once humanity's beacon of sustainable ignorance, now pointed right at them like a very shiny middle finger from the universe. Captain, it was Shelby, the chief engineer, her voice dripping with the kind of optimism that made Tersch want to invent new swears. We have a situation. You don't say, Shelby, and here I was thinking we were on a pleasure cruise through the void. He waved a hand at the holo display. Look at that, would you? Aliens repurposing our solar farm into a superlaser. That's a new one for the history books. Shelby squinted at the display, her eyes narrowing like she was trying to melt it with sheer willpower. Well, shit, she scratched her head, oil smudging her forehead like war paint. Can we not just, go around it? You mean avoid the giant kill beam? Brilliant, Shelby. Next time we're threatened, I'll just dodge side to side like a drunk spacer avoiding a bar tab. Tersch's sarcasm was its own brand of weaponized charm, often more effective than the ship's actual arsenal. An alarm blared, signaling that the universe was, as usual, not on their side. Tersch hit a button to silence it. What now? Sot Nikto, the ship's science officer and the kind of person who would bring a book to a gunfight, leaned over his console, adjusting his glasses that had no business being in space where gravity-defying contact lenses were a thing. We've intercepted a message, Cap. It's cryptic, of course it is, Tersch sighed. The universe loves a good riddle. Nikto cleared his throat, a sound akin to a cat hacking up a particularly stubborn hairball. It says, the garden's weeds grow from within. Tersch rolled his eyes so hard he nearly sprained something. Great. So not only do we have a giant alien death ray to deal with, but now we've got Shakespeare in space whispering sweet nothings about betrayal. Shelby shrugged, wiping her hands on her overalls, leaving smudges of oil that seemed more honest than any clean uniform. Sounds like someone's been watching too many old Earth dramas. Or maybe, Nikto said, pushing his glasses up his nose with the precision of a surgeon, someone aboard is not who they seem. What, you mean like Shelby's cooking? Tech specialist Jax piped in, his voice coming from somewhere beneath the console where he was probably fixing something he'd broken in a previous fit of genius. Hey, my cooking is an acquired taste, Shelby shot back, crossing her arms defensively. Acquired, more like survived, Tersch quipped, earning himself a glare sharp enough to cut through hull plating. Focus, children, Tersch said, waving a hand dismissively. We've got a superlaser to not get fried by and potential sabotage to not ignore. What's our play? We could try negotiating, Nikto suggested, clearly underestimating the universe's propensity for nonsense. Negotiating with what? The solar panels. Hey, buddy, how about not killing us today? Tersch chuckled, though it lacked real humor. The kind of laugh that came when you knew you were already waist-deep in the shit. Shelby rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed. Maybe we should just blow it up. Tempting, but I like not dying in space, Tersch replied. Let's keep that as plan C. What's plan B? Jax asked, his voice echoing from under the console, where a few sparks flew like disgruntled lightning bugs. Tersch leaned forward, resting his elbows on the console, staring at the ominous display of the superlaser hanging in space like a grim participation trophy. We figure out who the saboteur is before they turn us into space toast. Sounds fun, Shelby said, though her tone suggested she'd rather be doing literally anything else. Let's get started then, Tersch declared, standing up with the slight creak of a man who'd been sitting too long in one place. Nikto, you're our best bet for decrypting that message. Shelby, Jax, keep the ship running. You mean keep it from exploding, Jax corrected, emerging from beneath the console with singed hair and a grin that suggested he enjoyed the challenge more than was strictly healthy. Exactly, Tersch agreed. and I'll do what captains do best. Look important and pretend I know what I'm doing. The crew dispersed, leaving Tersh alone with his thoughts and a console that was as comforting as a cold cup of coffee. He glanced at the holo display again, the solar farm's ominous glow a constant reminder of the universe's rather twisted sense of humor. A soft beep indicated an incoming message. Another riddle. Tersh sighed, wondering if they'd accidentally subscribed to some cosmic poetry newsletter. The screen blinked with a line that made his stomach drop. The wheel turns, but whose hand guides it? Great, he muttered to himself. Now the universe is quoting fortune cookies. He tapped a command, sealing off the bridge for some much-needed alone time. Beyond the reinforced windows, the stars twinkled, blissfully unaware of human problems. Or perhaps they were laughing like cosmic bystanders to the galaxy's worst comedy show. "Why did I get out of bed today?" Tersh asked the void. The silence answered in the only way it could, with indifference. Hours later, Tersh was on his second cup of synthetic coffee, because nothing says I hate myself quite like drinking what tastes like burnt regret, when Shelby walked in, holding a tablet like it was a bomb. "Got something," she said. Her face was a blend of triumph and disbelief. Tersh raised an eyebrow. "What, a cure for my hangover?" "Better," she replied, thrusting the tablet at him. "We've got a list of potential saboteurs." Tersh took the tablet, skimming through names like he was reading obituaries for the living. "This is everyone," Shelby shrugged, grinning like a fox in a henhouse. "Exactly. You included yourself on the list. I like to keep things democratic," she said with a wink. "And here I thought you just had a flair for the dramatic," Tersh replied, handing the tablet back. "All right, let's start crossing off names." "How? Interviews? Like some sort of dystopian job interview?" Tersh grinned. "Exactly. You're a twisted man, Captain," Shelby said, though there was admiration in her eyes. "And that's why you love me," Tersh shot back, already heading for the door. "Let's get to it." The interviews were as painful as expected. A parade of faces, each as guilty as the last, everyone denying involvement because of course they would. "I didn't do it," said Rin, the botanist, his voice as shaky as his plants. "If I find out you're lying, I'll let Shelby cook you dinner," Tersh said, a threat that only seemed half in jest. "That's cruel, Captain," Rin replied, sweat beading on his forehead like a man on death row. By the end of it, Tersh was no closer to figuring out who was playing double agent, but he had a nice collection of nervous breakdowns to show for his efforts. He returned to the bridge, dropping into his seat with a sigh that could have powered a small city. Well, that was pointless. Shelby appeared, leaning against the doorframe with all the grace of a cat who'd just knocked something over. "Find anything, other than the fact that everyone's a terrible liar?" "Not really," Shelby frowned, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "What about that message? Any luck there?" Tersh shook his head. "Nikto's still working on it. Something about encryption levels being higher than a Martian at a rave." "Great," Shelby muttered. "So we're still flying blind into a laser light show." "Seems that way," Tersh agreed, his eyes drifting to the holo display. And then, as if the universe had a taste for irony, the lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into darkness. "What now?" Shelby groaned, fumbling for her flashlight. Tersh's voice cut through the gloom, equal parts irritation and resignation. "Looks like someone decided to kill the power. Guess we didn't need it anyway," Shelby quipped, shining her light around like an improvised ghost story. As the emergency systems kicked in, casting everything in a sickly red glow, Tersh felt the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders like a leaden cloak. "We're running out of time," he said, his voice grim. "Good thing we're not running out of problems," Shelby replied, ever the optimist. Tersh chuckled darkly. "Let's hope we find our saboteur before they find us." And with that, the radiant dawn continued its slow crawl through the void, a battered ship with a haunted crew teetering on the edge of oblivion. The universe watched, silent and uncaring, as one captain and his mismatched team raced against a superlaser and their own inner demons. The next move was theirs to make, and, as Tersh knew all too well, The universe adored a good cliffhanger. Captain Tersch sat in a chair that pretended it was comfortable while holding a mug of synthetic coffee that pretended it was drinkable. The bridge was aglow with emergency lights, painting everything in a disturbing shade of red that made everyone look like they'd just risen from the depths of hell. It was fitting, really, given their current predicament. Shelby, the chief engineer, was hunched over a console, her fingers dancing over the controls with the kind of practiced ease only years of putting out metaphorical and literal fires could provide. "Well, Captain, I've got good news and bad news," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship. Tersch took a sip of his regret-flavored coffee and grimaced. "I don't suppose the good news involves us winning the space lottery. Not unless by lottery you mean we're not dead yet," she replied, not looking up. "I'll take what I can get. And the bad news, the ship's systems have definitely been tampered with." "Looks like someone's been poking around where they shouldn't," Tersch sighed, setting down his mug. "Fantastic, just what we needed. Any idea who might have decided to play saboteur?" Shelby shrugged, a movement that somehow conveyed the weight of the universe's indifference. "Could be anyone, even you." "Well, I've always had a self-destructive streak," Tersch said, though his grin was more strained than usual. Sot Nikto, the science officer, appeared with the stealth of a ninja librarian. He adjusted his glasses with the precision of a man who'd be lost without his crutch. "Captain, while you were busy interrogating the crew like a second-rate detective, Dr. Leora and Vex have been analyzing the Superlaser. Please tell me they've found a way to turn it into a giant disco ball instead," Tersch said, leaning back in his chair. Nikto shook his head, his expression grim. "No such luck, but they've confirmed it's powerful enough to vaporize a planet. Maybe two if it's feeling frisky." "Perfect," Tersch muttered. "Just what we need, a cosmic death ray with a personality disorder." "There's more," Nikto continued, his voice as dry as a Martian dust storm. "They suspect the ship's systems have been compromised to ensure any countermeasures we attempt will fail. So, we're essentially on a giant flying coffin, and someone's got their hand on the lid," Tersch summarized, his eyes narrowing. Shelby tried to look on the bright side, despite the fact that the bright side had apparently taken a vacation. "At least we know what we're up against." "Sort of. Yeah, nothing beats knowing you're screwed in exquisite detail," Tersch replied, standing and stretching the kinks out of his back. "Let's go see what Vex and Leora have cooked up for us." The journey to the engineering bay was filled with the ship's ominous creaks and groans. The radiant dawn had seen better days, much like its captain. Tersch liked to think of it as the ship's version of small talk. In the engineering bay, Vex was muttering to himself in a corner, surrounded by a chaotic mess of wires, tools, and parts that suggested either a genius at work or an impending meltdown, possibly both. Dr. Leora, the ship's biochemist turned reluctant astrophysicist, leaned over a console, her eyes glued to the holo display. "Ah, Captain," Leora said as they entered, her tone suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else. "Glad you could join our little science fair," Tersch nodded. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. So, how dead are we?" Vex looked up, his expression a mix of irritation and mild amusement. "Dead, not quite yet. But we've got a front-row seat to the apocalypse if that's any consolation. Apocalypse or not, we'd better figure out who's got a grudge against us," Tersch said. "Because I'm getting tired of dodging cosmic bullets." Leora gestured to the display, where the Superlaser gleamed like a malevolent star. "This thing is impressive if you're into planetary genocide. Its energy output is off the charts." "Great. So it's not just a death ray, it's an overachieving death ray," Tersch said. "Whoever's behind this knows their stuff," Vex added, glancing up from his pile of chaos. "They've set things up so any attempt to shut it down from here will just trigger a failsafe. So, it's a doomsday device with a sense of humor." "Fantastic," Tersch said. "Can it be stopped?" "Not easily," Vex replied. "We'd need to get up close and personal, as in kiss it on the cheek close." Shelby snorted. "Sounds like a suicide mission." Tersh rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache that promised to become the stuff of legends. So what you're saying is, we either find our saboteur and hope they can undo what they've done, or we somehow get close enough to this thing to pull the plug ourselves. Those are our best options, Leora confirmed, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who knew just how slim those options were. Then let's hope the crew's loyalty is easier to fix than the ship's systems, Tersh said. Because I'm not ready to add human toast to my resume. As the crew continued their grim tasks, Tersh felt the weight of suspicion pressing down like an unwelcome guest. Every sideways glance held a question, every whispered conversation a potential threat. The radiant dawn was a powder keg, and someone was holding a match. In the mess hall, the atmosphere was tense. Conversations were hushed, filled with the kind of forced cheer one might find at a particularly awkward family reunion. Tersh stood at the head of the room, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "All right, everyone, listen up," he called, his voice cutting through the murmur of discontent. "We've got a problem, and it's bigger than my caffeine addiction." A few people chuckled, though the laughter was edged with unease. "We've got a saboteur on board," Tersh continued. "And until we figure out who it is, nobody's sleeping soundly, myself included." Rin, the botanist, raised a hand like a schoolboy, hoping the teacher wouldn't call on him. "What's the plan, Captain?" "The plan," Tersh said, "is to find out who's been tampering with the systems and stop them before they turn us all into space debris." "That's comforting," said Leora, who had appeared at Tersh's side like a ghost with a PhD. "Hey, I aim to please," Tersh replied, though his heart wasn't in it. "In the meantime, keep your eyes and ears open. If you see anything suspicious, report it immediately. Or, just blame it on the nearest engineer," Jax said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Shelby rolled her eyes. "If I wanted your opinion, Jax, I'd have asked for it, or found a way to extract it from one of your broken gadgets." "All right, enough," Tersh said, holding up a hand. "Let's focus on not dying, shall we?" The gathering dispersed, leaving Tersh standing with Leora, the silence between them as heavy as the ship's hull. "This isn't exactly what I signed up for," Leora said, her voice softer now that the room had emptied. "Join the club," Tersh replied. "But you're good at what you do, and we need every brain on the ship working overtime." She nodded, though her eyes were distant, as if she were already calculating the odds of survival. They weren't good. As the days passed, the atmosphere aboard the Radiant Dawn remained tense. Tersh found himself watching his crew as if they were all suspects in a murder mystery. Every conversation was a potential clue, every glance a hint of betrayal. In the engine room, Shelby worked tirelessly, her hands moving with the precision of a surgeon as she coaxed life from the failing systems. "If this ship survives, I'm taking it on a date," she muttered, wiping her hands on her overalls. "Just make sure it's a cheap date," Tersh said, leaning against the doorway. "We're on a budget. If it had feelings, it would be offended," Shelby replied, indicating the ship with a sweep of her arm. "Good thing it doesn't," Tersh said. "Any progress on the sabotage front?" "Not much," she admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "Whoever it is, they're good. Better than us." "Let's hope not," she said, though the look in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. In the lab, Vex and Leora continued their work, deciphering the Superlaser's secrets one line of code at a time. "If we can just find the right sequence, we might be able to disable it," Vex said, though his tone was more hopeful than confident. "Or we might end up blowing ourselves to kingdom come," Leora replied dryly. "Always the optimist, aren't you?" Vex said with a smirk. "It's a gift," she replied, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Tersh watched them work, feeling a strange sense of pride despite the circumstances. They were his crew, and flawed though they were the best shot he had at saving them all. "Keep at it," he said, clapping Vex on the shoulder. "You might just save our skins yet, or roast them," Vex quipped. Tersh chuckled, though it came out more like a cough. "Let's aim for the former." As the radiant dawn drifted through the void, Tersh couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The universe was a cruel mistress, and it seemed she wasn't done playing her games just yet. But if she wanted a fight, by God, she'd get one. Because if there was one thing Tersh knew how to do, it was go down swinging. The ship's hull groaned like an old man getting out of bed, and Tersh winced, feeling every creak like a personal insult. If the Radiant Dawn had a voice, she'd be swearing at them all right now. Or laughing. Probably both. "We're losing power faster than hope in a politician's promise," Shelby said, adjusting her toolkit with the air of someone ready to perform mechanical surgery. She was the ship's lifeline, and right now that line was frayed and ready to snap. "Can't you just sweet-talk the engines a little?" Tersh suggested, though he knew sweet-talking wasn't Shelby's style. Her idea of persuasion involved a wrench and a lot of swearing. "Sure, I'll ask them nicely," Shelby replied. "Right after I smack them around a bit. Maybe they'll like it." Sot Nikto, ever the voice of grim reason, looked up from his holo display. "Captain, the energy reserves are depleting at an alarming rate. At this trajectory, we might as well be drifting in space with a kick-me sign on our aft." "Let's add running out of power to our list of why today sucks," Tersh said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Any ideas on how to not become a cosmic paperweight? Short of finding a magic button labeled Fix All Problems, I'm fresh out," Vex said, not looking up from the wires he was currently wrestling with. "Good thing I stocked up on magic beans before we left port," Shelby chimed with a roll of her eyes. "Everyone's a comedian," Tersh muttered, peering over Nikto's shoulder. The holo display was a mess of tangled data streams and cryptic codes, enough to give anyone a headache. "What are we looking at here, Nikto?" "Messages," Nikto replied, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Hidden within the ship systems, and not love letters unless you fancy declarations of doom. Messages. From whom?" Tersh squinted at the screen as if glaring could force it to spill its secrets. "From someone who enjoys our current predicament way too much," Nikto said. "And if I had to venture a guess, our saboteur has friends on the outside." "Friends?" Tersh asked, though the word tasted like poison. "Or enemies with benefits?" "Either way, they've left us a few nasty surprises," Vex said, pulling a tangle of wires free. "I found a sequence in the system logs that suggests someone's been chatting with an alien faction, the kind that turns solar farms into death rays." "Wonderful," Tersh said. "Aliens with a sense of humor, because what we really need is extraterrestrial trolls. More like cosmic bullies," Leora added, joining them with a data pad in hand. "And they've been busy. According to this, they've siphoned energy from our reserves." "We're running on fumes." "Fumes and sarcasm," Shelby quipped. "Add desperation to that list," Tersh said. "We need to keep this ship afloat and figure out how deep this rabbit hole goes. I'd rather not find out how many planets this superlaser can incinerate." "Let's not forget our little saboteur," Vex said. "If they've got friends in high places, we're out of our depth." "Then let's start swimming," Tersh said, though he felt like he was already drowning. "Nikto, decrypt those messages. Leora, Vex, keep working on disabling that overgrown flashlight. Shelby, see if you can coax more life out of our systems. We've got a galaxy to save, and not much time to do it." As the crew dispersed with grim determination, Tersh lingered. The Radiant Dawn might be a rusty bucket careening towards disaster, but she was his rusty bucket. And if he had anything to say about it, she wasn't going down without a fight. In the engine room, Shelby was elbows deep in grease and grime, coaxing the engines with a mix of tender insults and precise engineering. "Come on, old girl," she murmured. "Give me something to work with." "Talking to the engines again?" Tersh asked, leaning against the wall with the casual ease of a man who knew he was in the way. "Just a pep talk," Shelby replied, not looking up. "They're shy around strangers. You mean they don't like being insulted?" "Something like that," Tersh chuckled, though it was more of a dry rasp. "Any chance we can make it to the end of the day without everything falling apart?" "Define everything," Shelby said. "Because right now, even breathing is a luxury." "Good to know," Tersh said. "At least we're not aiming high." "Never did like nosebleeds," Shelby replied, giving the engine one last pat. "There, That should hold for a bit. Until it doesn't. Exactly. In the lab, Vex and Leora were knee-deep in technobabble, their fingers dancing over consoles with the kind of frantic energy that spoke of impending doom. If we can just isolate the right frequency, we might be able to disrupt the alien signals, Vex said, his tone a mix of hope and desperation. And if we can't, Leora asked, though she already knew the answer. Then we hope the Superlaser has an off day, Vex replied. Comforting. Not my specialty. Tersh watched them work, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on him. Any progress? Some, Leora said, though her voice was tinged with exhaustion. We've managed to isolate part of the signal, but it's like trying to unscramble a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. Sounds fun. It's a riot. Tersh nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Keep at it. We can't let these bastards win. We've got this, Vex said, though his eyes were shadowed with doubt. Not like we have much choice, Leora added. As Tersh left them to their work, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. The radiant dawn was a candle in the wind, and the storm was closing in. In the mess hall, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken fears and whispered suspicions. Tersh stood at the head of the room, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. All right, crew. Listen up. The conversations died down, eyes turning to him with a mix of hope and resignation. We've got a saboteur on board and alien friends to boot. Our systems are failing and we're running low on power, but we're not dead yet. A few people chuckled, though the laughter was hollow. We've found hidden messages in the system, Tersh continued, suggesting someone's been playing footsie with an alien faction. And they've been draining our energy reserves. Rin, the botanist, raised a hand. So what's the plan, Captain? The plan is to survive, Tersh said. And maybe, just maybe, save a planet or two while we're at it. But we can't do it alone. We need everyone on board. So keep your eyes and ears open and report anything suspicious. Or anything that looks like it might explode, Shelby added. That too. The crew dispersed, leaving Tersh standing alone in the quiet. The weight of command was a heavy one, and he could feel it pressing down, threatening to crush him. But for now, he had to keep moving, keep fighting, because the Radiant Dawn was more than just a ship. She was their home, and Tersh wasn't about to let her go down without a fight. Back on the bridge, Nikto was hunched over his console, his fingers flying across the keyboard with the precision of a man who didn't know the meaning of sleep. Captain, he said, not looking up, I've decrypted part of the message. And, Tersh asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. It's a directive, Nikto replied. From the aliens. They're instructing our saboteur to maintain the system's integrity until they can arrive. Arrive? Tersh felt a chill run down his spine. As in they're coming here. Seems that way, Nikto said, adjusting his glasses. And they're not bringing a welcome basket. Great, Tersh muttered. Aliens at the door with a planetary oven, just what I needed. Do we have any idea who the saboteur is? Nikto asked. Not yet, Tersh said, but we've got to find them before their friends show up and turn us into space dust. Easy as pie, Nikto said, though his tone suggested it was anything but. Keep working on it, Tersh said, and let me know the second you find anything. Nikto nodded, his attention already back on the screen. You got it, Captain. As Tersh left the bridge, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The universe was vast and uncaring, and they were just one tiny ship caught in its web. But if there was one thing Tersh knew, it was that humans were stubborn, and they weren't going down without a fight. Not today. Not ever. Tersh stood in the dimly lit bridge, the blue glow of the holo display reflecting off his tired eyes. He sipped his synthetic coffee, grimacing at the taste. Whoever said better than nothing never tried this sludge, he muttered to no one in particular. Still beats licking the walls for moisture, Shelby quipped as she entered, wiping grease onto her coveralls. What's the situation, Captain? Our situation? Oh, nothing much, Tersh replied with a shrug. Just trying to avoid getting fried by an alien death ray while playing Sherlock Holmes with a saboteur on board. You know, the usual, Shelby snorted. Sounds like a walk in the park. If that park was on fire. As if on cue, Leora burst onto the bridge, her eyes alight with the kind of energy only a mad scientist or someone with a terrible idea could possess. "I've got it," she exclaimed, holding her data pad like it was the Holy Grail. "Please tell me it is a way to save our collective asses," Tersh said, setting his mug down. Leora waved the pad triumphantly. "I've deciphered more of the messages. Turns out our friendly neighborhood aliens have some rather interesting belief systems. Interesting as in we can use them to our advantage." Tersh asked, hope tingling in his voice. "Exactly," Leora said, her grin wide. "They seem to have a thing for holy manifestations. If we can use the Superlaser to project some false signals, we might be able to convince them we're their new deities." There was a beat of silence, followed by a collective exhale of disbelief. "So, we're going full pantheon?" Vex asked, appearing from behind a console, wires dangling like mechanical dreadlocks. "Because I've always wanted to smite people." "Calm down, Thor," Shelby said. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "How risky is this plan, Leora?" Leora shrugged. "Well, considering we'll be trying to outsmart an alien race that converted a solar farm into a planetary oven, let's just say it's somewhere between are you out of your mind and we're all gonna die." "Comforting," Tersh said, rubbing his temples. "But it might be our best shot. Better to risk playing gods than end up as cosmic ash." Sot Nikto, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke up. "There's also the small matter of actually executing the plan without getting blown to pieces. Details," Tersh said with a dismissive wave. "We'll iron those out as we go. First, let's figure out how to make these signals. We'll need to reroute the ship's power to the Superlaser. Temporarily," Leora explained. "It'll be like trying to jumpstart a dead car with a paperclip and a prayer, but we can manage." "Great, I always wanted to be the god of bad ideas," Tersh said, chuckling despite himself. "Let's get started." The crew sprang into action, each of them tackling their part of the plan. Shelby headed to the engine room to coax more power out of the ship's dwindling reserves. Vex and Leora began reprogramming the ship systems to project the false signals, while Tersh and Nikto worked on deciphering more of the messages for any additional leverage. In the engine room, Shelby clattered around like a one-woman band, her tools creating a symphony of clanks and curses. "Come on, you stubborn hunk of metal," she muttered, coaxing the engines to life. "We've got miracles to make." Back on the bridge, Vex and Leora were knee-deep in cables and circuits, their hands moving with the frantic, precise dance of two people who didn't have time for mistakes. "If we can adjust the frequency here," Vex said, pointing to a tangle of wires, "we might be able to mimic their signals closely enough to convince them. Or we blow ourselves up trying," Leora replied, her fingers never pausing. "Either way, it'll be one hell of a show." Tersh watched his crew at work, a mix of pride and anxiety twisting in his gut. "Nikto, anything else on those messages?" Nikto adjusted his glasses, the screen reflecting in his lens. "Just more instructions to the saboteur. Looks like they're supposed to maintain the integrity of the ship until the aliens get here. Seems our little rat is more of a handyman than a destroyer, which means they probably haven't done anything we can't fix," Tersh mused. "Provided we find them first." "The clock's ticking," Captain Nikto said, eyes narrowing at a line of code. "We need to be faster than their welcome party." "Then let's get a move on," Tersh said, clapping his hands together. "We've got a universe to save and not much time to do it." As the Iors ticked by, the bridge buzzed with activity, a frenzied hive under siege. Tersh found himself pacing, his mind racing with contingency plans and what-ifs. It was all or nothing, and as ridiculous as the plan was, it was the best they had. "Captain, we're ready," Leora announced, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. "Everything set good," Tersh said, turning to face his crew. "Let's make history, folks, or at least not become it." Shelby's voice crackled over the comms. "Engines are primed. We've got enough juice for one good shot." "Make it count." "Copy that," Tersh replied. "Vex, Leora, let's see if we can make these alien sea stars in all the wrong ways." The ship vibrated beneath their feet, the power surging through its veins like a shot of adrenaline. The Superlaser whirred to life, a beast waking from its slumber. "Here goes nothing," Vex muttered, fingers dancing over the console. Activating the signal projection. Now, silence fell over the bridge, each crew member holding their breath as the laser fired, sending a beam of light into the void. The screens began to flicker with the false signals, a tapestry of lies woven from light and shadow. "Any sign of alien activity?" Tersh asked, his voice taut with anticipation. "Scans are picking up movement," Nikto reported, eyes glued to the readings. "Looks like they're buying it." Cheers erupted from the crew, a brief moment of triumph in the chaos. "We did it!" Leora exclaimed, grinning like a kid in a candy store. "Don't start celebrating yet," Tersh cautioned. "We've got to keep this up until they are convinced we're their new spiritual guides. Nothing like a little divine intervention," Shelby quipped over the comms. "Let's just hope they don't ask for a miracle, or a refund," Vex added with a chuckle. "Still, I'd say we've got a fighting chance." As the crew settled into their roles, maintaining the signals and watching for any sign of the aliens changing their minds, Tersh allowed himself a small smile. It was a gamble, a reckless leap into the unknown, but that was what made humanity special, he mused. Their ability to stare into the abyss and wink. Captain Nikto said, drawing Tersh's attention. "The aliens are responding. They're sending back signals of their own, acknowledging our presence." "Well, I'll be damned," Tersh said, shaking his head in disbelief. "We've actually managed to fool them, at least for now," Nikto replied, not quite able to hide his own disbelief. "Then let's not waste the opportunity," Tersh said. "Keep those signals steady. We've got to convince them we're the real deal until we can figure out our next move." As the crew worked, the bridge felt alive with purpose, a small bastion of defiance in a universe that seemed determined to snuff them out. Tersh knew the road ahead was perilous, fraught with dangers they couldn't even begin to imagine. But for now, they had hope, and sometimes that was enough. "Captain," Leora said, her voice breaking into his thoughts. "I think we've got another problem." "Of course we do," Tersh sighed. "What is it now?" "The saboteurs back at it," she said, pointing to the erratic data streams on her console. "They're trying to undermine our signals. Can we stop them?" Tersh asked, his tone edged with urgency. "Only if we can find them first," Leora replied. "And fast." "All right, folks," Tersh said, rising from his seat. "We've got a snake in the grass. Time to flush them out." The crew sprang into action, each member focused on tracking down the saboteur among them. It was a race against time, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with their very survival on the line. "Keep those signals steady," Tersh barked. "We can't let the aliens see through our little charade." "On it, Captain," Vex replied, his hands blurring over the controls. As the minutes ticked by, Tersh felt the weight of the universe pressing down on him, a relentless march towards an uncertain future. But he refused to buckle under the pressure. They'd made it this far against all odds, and they weren't about to give up now. "Captain, I think we've got them," Nikto said, his voice tense with excitement. "The sabotage, it's coming from the crew quarters. Time to pay a visit," Tersh said, his jaw set in determination. "Shelby, meet me at the crew quarters. We've got a rat to catch." "On my way," Shelby replied, her voice crackling over the comms. Tersh moved swiftly through the corridors of the radiant dawn, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and plans. They were so close, and yet one false step could spell disaster. But he couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. As he reached the crew quarters, Shelby was already there, her expression a mask of steely resolve. "Ready to catch us a saboteur?" she asked, her hand resting on the wrench at her side. "More than ready," Tersh replied, nodding. "Let's see who's been pulling the strings." The tension in the air was palpable as they approached the quarters, each step echoing with the promise of confrontation. They had come too far to back down now. The truth lay just beyond the door, and Tersh was determined to uncover it. They'd fooled the aliens, turned desperation into opportunity, and now it was time to face the enemy within. Tersh and Shelby stood outside the crew quarters, a tense pause as they steeled themselves for the confrontation ahead. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a room that looked like a junkyard had exploded inside a submarine. Cables hung from every surface like the guts of some unfortunate mechanical beast, and scattered gear littered the floor. "Looks like someone tried to redecorate with a blowtorch," Shelby muttered, stepping over what may have once been a data pad, now just a sad pile of circuits. "Either that or our saboteurs throwing the worst house party in history," Tersh replied, scanning the room. "And I wasn't invited. Figures." They crept forward, eyes searching for any sign of movement. Every shadow seemed an enemy, every creak of the ship a potential ambush. Tersh felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a bad hangover. They needed to find their saboteur, and fast, before the jig was up with their alien friends. "Over here," Shelby whispered, pointing to a makeshift workstation cobbled together from stolen parts. A data terminal blinked innocuously in the dim light, but the rapidly scrolling code on its screen suggested something far more sinister than solitaire. "Well, this is cozy," Tersh said, eyes narrowing. "Looks like our rat has been busy." "Busy's one way to put it," Shelby said, reaching for the terminal. "Another would be in over their head." Tersh was about to reply when a noise made him freeze. Footsteps. Someone was approaching, and they weren't making any effort to be quiet about it. He exchanged a glance with Shelby, who nodded, tightening her grip on the wrench as if it could double as a crucifix for warding off evil. The door swung open again, and in walked Davix, the ship's quartermaster, with the casual confidence of a cat who had never been caught with a paw in the canary cage. He blinked at Tersh and Shelby like they'd just caught him in the middle of an embarrassingly personal moment. "Well, this is awkward," Davix said, scratching his head. "I suppose the jig's up, huh?" "That would depend," Tersh replied, crossing his arms. "Are you going to confess, or should we just play charades until the aliens toast us?" Davix sighed, looking more resigned than guilty. All right, you got me, it's just." "It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" Shelby piped up, raising an eyebrow. "Because it looks like you've been sabotaging us 6 ways to Sunday." Davix shook his head. No, I was sabotaging the sabotage. There's a saboteur, all right, but it ain't me. I've been trying to patch things up, keep the ship running until we can sort this mess out." Tersh exchanged a look with Shelby, considering the possibility. "Why didn't you come forward? You know, instead of playing secret squirt with our lives on the line. Because whoever's behind this has eyes everywhere," Davix said, his voice low and earnest. "I figured it was safer to work from the shadows. Besides, I didn't know who I could trust." "Well, you've got us now," Tersh said, though the irony wasn't lost on him that they were still fumbling in the dark. "But we're running out of time." "Do you have any idea who the real saboteur might be?" Davix hesitated, glancing nervously around the room. "I've got a few suspicions, but nothing concrete. Whoever they are, they're damn good at covering their tracks." "Fantastic," Tersh muttered. "A ghost sabotaging a ship that's barely holding together by a prayer and some duct tape. What could possibly go wrong?" "Look, we need to get back to the bridge," Shelby said, checking her wrist holo display. "The Superlaser's charging and we're almost out of juice." "Right," Tersh agreed, casting one last look at the room. "Davix, stay on this. We need to keep the ship from falling apart long enough to trick those aliens into worshipping us as their new gods." Davix nodded, his expression a mix of reluctance and determination. "You got it, Captain." As they left the crew quarters, Tersh couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a game of three-dimensional chess while blindfolded, with the stakes being their continued existence in the universe. But what choice did they have? The only way out was through, a philosophy that had served him well enough in the past, though in the past, the universe hadn't been actively trying to turn him into space dust. Back on the bridge, the situation had not improved. If anything, it had developed a few more complications, like a problem child who'd suddenly discovered the joys of finger painting with forbidden substances. "The aliens are responding more actively," Nikto reported, his focus unbroken as he tracked the alien signals. "They're sending more complex patterns. If we can decipher them, we might be able to maintain the charade a little longer. Or they might be calling in reinforcements," Vex added, his humor more sardonic than ever. "Wouldn't that be a treat?" Let's not think about that, Tersh said, the effort of remaining optimistic starting to feel like a full-time job. Just keep the signals steady. Leora was at the console, her hands moving with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. We're running out of power, she informed them, as if they needed another reason to panic. The Superlaser's charging, but it's draining our reserves faster than I anticipated. So we're either going to impress the aliens or self-destruct trying, Tersh said, rubbing his temples. A real win-win scenario. Captain, Shelby's voice crackled over the comms, having returned to the engine room. I've managed to squeeze a bit more power out of the engines, but it's not going to last. Understood, Tersh replied. Just keep us going as long as you can. The bridge felt like a pressure cooker, the tension building with every tick of the clock. Tersh paced, mind racing for solutions that seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. They were running out of time, out of options. The lights flickered, the ship shuddering as if in sympathy with their plight. What was that? Leora asked, eyes wide. Probably the ship's way of saying it's had enough of our nonsense, Vex suggested. We've got to stabilize the power flow, Leora said, her fingers a blur over the console. If things keep going this way, we're going to lose control of the Superlaser. Great, Tersh muttered. Because that's exactly what we need right now, a rogue superweapon on top of everything else. Captain, Nikto called out, his tone urgent. The aliens are sending a new signal. It's almost like a countdown. Tersh's stomach dropped, fear and frustration warring within him. A countdown to what? Based on the frequency and pattern, Nikto replied, his voice tight. I'd say they're preparing to fire their own planet killer. Of course they are, Tersh said, throwing his hands up in exasperation. Why wouldn't they be planning to obliterate us? Captain, we need to do something, Leora insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. If they fire that thing, we'll be toast, Vex finished unnecessarily. Tersh thought fast, the weight of command feeling like an anchor around his neck. We need to convince them it's not necessary. That we're the real deal. And how exactly do we do that? Leora asked, disbelief dripping from every syllable. By giving them a display of power, Tersh said, the idea forming even as he spoke. Something so convincing they'll think twice before pulling the trigger. You're talking about using the Superlaser, Vex remarked, a slow grin spreading across his face. As a bluff. Exactly, Tersh confirmed. We charge it, make it look like we're going to fire at them and hope like hell they back off. That's one hell of a Hail Mary, Leora said, shaking her head. But it might just work. Or it might blow us up in the process, Nikto pointed out, ever the voice of grim reason. But I suppose we're running out of better ideas. All right, everyone, Tersh said, clapping his hands together. Let's make this happen. We bluff, we scare them, and we live to die another day. The energy on the bridge shifted, the crew moving with purpose, driven by the knowledge that this was it, their last chance. The lights flickered again, a reminder of how precarious their situation was. The Superlaser hummed, a beast awakening, ready to roar into the void. Ready, Leora announced, her voice steady. On your command, Captain. Tersh took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over him. This was it. The moment where they either saved themselves or went down in a blaze of misguided glory. Do it, he ordered, his voice firm with the resolve of a man who had nothing left to lose. The Superlaser powered up, a low, ominous hum filling the bridge as the ship trembled under the strain. The holo display showed the alien vessels reacting, their signals shifting in a flurry of confusion and alarm. They're buying it, Nikto reported, a hint of incredulity in his tone. Keep it steady, Tersh instructed, his heart pounding in his chest. We need to make them believe they are outgunned. The seconds stretched into eternity, tension winding tighter with every passing moment. The ship groaned, the strain of maintaining the charade pushing it to its limits. Captain, the power levels are critical, Shelby's voice came over the comms, a note of urgency threading through. We can't keep this up much longer. Just a little longer, Tersh said, willing every ounce of luck and fate to be on their side. The bridge fell silent, the crew holding their breath as the aliens considered their options. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat a drum of fate. Finally, the alien signals changed, shifting from aggression to retreat. The countdown stopped, the threat of imminent destruction fading as quickly as it had come. "They're pulling back," Nikto confirmed, disbelief coloring his words. A collective exhale swept the bridge, relief washing over them like a cleansing wave. They had done it. Against all odds, their bluff had held and they had bought themselves a reprieve. "Well, I'll be damned," Tersh said, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. "We actually pulled it off. For now," Leora reminded him, her expression cautious. "But we're not out of the woods yet." "We'll deal with that when we get there," Tersh replied, his spirits buoyed by their success. "For now, let's savor the victory." The crew allowed themselves a moment of triumph, the shadows of their grim reality held at bay by the light of their survival. They had stared into the abyss, and for once, the abyss had blinked first. But Tersh knew they weren't safe yet. The saboteur was still out there, lurking among them, and the aliens could change their minds at any moment. The battle was far from over, and the stakes remained as high as ever. Yet for the first time since this nightmare had begun, Tersh felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the darkness and survived. Now all they had to do was find the courage to finish the fight. The bridge hummed with a strange mixture of triumph and dread. They'd pulled off a bluff that would make the universe itself raise an eyebrow, but reality had a funny way of not staying fooled for long. "All right, we've bought ourselves a breather," Tersh said, clapping Vex on the back. "Now all we have to do is find our friendly neighborhood saboteur, fix the ship that's one wrong move away from spontaneous disassembly, and convince a bunch of aliens that we're the new gods on the cosmic block. Easy peasy. Don't forget," Vex chimed in, "we're doing all that while running on power reserves that make a flickering candle look reliable." "But hey, at least we've got our health, right?" Tersh shot him a look, as if health had ever been on the list of their concerns. "Let's not push our luck." Nikto, meanwhile, was leaning over the console, his expression sharper than a plasma blade. "You know, I've been thinking," he started, which was never a good sign. "Our systems didn't just get tampered with accidentally. Someone on this ship knows exactly what they are doing. Thanks for the enlightening detective work, Sherlock," Tersh said dryly. "Got anything a bit more actionable?" Nikto tapped a few buttons, and the holo display flickered to show a series of logs, all marked with a suspiciously consistent timestamp. "Whoever did this has been accessing the system at the same time every day. And look here," he pointed, "they left a tell." "Idiot," Vex muttered almost approvingly. "Only one person logs in at that hour, and it's never for anything innocent," Nikto replied, a grim smile playing on his lips. The room fell silent, a collective realization settling over the crew like a thick, suffocating blanket. Everyone avoided eye contact, as if afraid of who might be revealed by a casual glance. Finally, Tersh broke the silence. "All right, who are we dealing with?" Vex leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Only one person it could be. Davix, what?" Shelby's voice crackled over the comms from the engine room. "You're saying Davix is the saboteur?" "I knew he was too smug for his own good," Leora added, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But I never pegged him for a traitor." "Maybe he's not," Tersh suggested, though even he didn't sound convinced. "He could have been manipulated or coerced. Or he could just be a bastard," Nikto said, ever the pragmatist. "Seen it before, likely see it again." Tersh sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "All right, let's get him up here." Time for a little chat. It took only a few minutes for Davix to arrive, his easy confidence now looking a touch forced, like a man wearing a shirt 2 sizes too small. "Captain, you wanted to see me." "Yeah, Davix," Tersh said, leaning against the console. "Seems like we've got a bit of a problem and your name's come up." Davix looked around, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "Someone's been tampering with the systems," Vex cut in, his tone sharper than usual. "Same time, same logs, and funnily enough it coincides with your shifts." Davix opened his mouth, and for a moment Tersh thought he'd deny it. But instead a strange look passed over his face, flickering guilt, mixed with something else. "I didn't mean to do it," he said finally, voice low. "I didn't have a choice." "Start talking," Tersh ordered, crossing his arms. "Now, I've been getting these messages," Davix explained, words tumbling out like rocks from a landslide. "They just started appearing on my data pad. Orders, instructions I couldn't ignore. And you didn't think to mention this sooner?" Leora asked, eyebrows raised. Davix shook his head, looking like a man caught between a rock and a very hard place. "They weren't just threats, they were promises. It's like they knew my every move, and if I didn't follow through, more than just your career on the line, huh?" Nikto said, his expression softening just a fraction. Tersh exchanged glances with Leora, the reality of their situation settling heavily. "Looks like the aliens have been playing a long game," he said. "And we got caught in the middle. But what now?" Shelby piped in over the comms, a note of urgency in her voice. "If we can't trust our own crew, we can," Tersh interrupted, making a decision. "We have to. Davix, can you undo whatever they've made you do?" "I think so," Davix said, relief and determination warring on his face. "I mean, I never wanted to hurt the ship or any of you." "Then get to it," Tersh said, nodding towards the console. "We've got a superlaser to unscrew, systems to stabilize, and a bluff to maintain." As Davix set to work, a new energy filled the bridge, a sense of purpose, fragile but undeniable. They were once again on the same side of the fight. "All right, people," Tersh said, clapping his hands for attention. "We're all in this together. Vex, keep an eye on the signals. Leora, get the superlaser ready to broadcast those false signals. Shelby, make sure the engines don't give out. Nikto, keep us in the loop with the aliens, and Davix." "I'm on it, Cap," Davix replied, his fingers flying over the terminal as he worked to reverse the sabotage. The crew moved with renewed vigor, driven by the knowledge that they were closer to their goal than ever before. It was almost enough to make Tersh believe they might just pull this off. Almost. Even as they worked, the ship groaned and shuddered, a physical reminder of its precarious state. Power flickered, threatening to plunge them back into darkness, but each time they managed to hold the line. "So what do we do once we've fooled the aliens?" Vex asked, breaking the tense silence. "Just keep pretending we're gods, pretty much," Tersh replied, managing a wry grin. "We keep them guessing, keep them scared until we can get the hell out of here." "Not a bad plan," Leora said, her tone light despite the circumstances. "Assuming we don't get blown to bits first." "Always the optimist," Tersh said with a chuckle, feeling the weight on his shoulders lighten just a fraction. Hours passed like minutes as they worked, the bridge becoming a hive of activity and tension. They were a ragtag crew on a ship that had seen better days, but they were united, at least for now, by a common goal and a common enemy. Captain Davix said, looking up from the console with a grim smile, "I think I've got it." "The systems are back online." "Good work," Tersh replied, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now let's finish this." "Leora, are we ready to broadcast those signals?" Leora nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "Ready and waiting on your command." Tersh took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him like a familiar cloak. They were standing on the edge of a knife, and all it would take was one wrong move to send them tumbling into oblivion. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Let's give them a show they won't forget." The superlaser hummed to life, its power contained and focused. On the holo display, the alien signals flared, uncertainty and fear coloring their patterns. They were watching, waiting to see if the bluff would hold. "Broadcast in 3, 2, 1, Leora counted down, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. The signals went out, a cascade of lights and sound that would either solidify their ruse or end them all. The crew held their breath, the seconds stretching into eternity as they waited for the aliens' response. Tersh watched the holo display, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. All they could do now was hope and pray that their bluff would hold, that their deception would keep the wolves at bay just a little longer. Finally, the alien signals shifted, moving from aggression to wary retreat. They bought it, at least for now. A collective sigh of relief swept the bridge, a fragile victory in the face of overwhelming odds. They'd done it. They'd bought themselves another day, another chance to survive, to fight. "Guess we're gods now," Vex quipped, a lopsided grin on his face. "Only until they figure out we're just as clueless as they are," Tersh replied, unable to suppress a smile of his own. But he knew their victory was only temporary. The saboteur had been dealt with, but their situation remained precarious. The aliens would be watching, waiting for any sign of weakness or deception. For now, though, they'd made it through the storm. They'd faced the abyss and lived to tell the tale, if only for a little while longer. It was more than they could have hoped for, more than they could have dared to dream. And as Tersh looked around at his crew, a ragtag band of survivors united by necessity and circumstance, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't in a long time: hope. "All right, people," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "Let's keep moving. We've got a ship to save and an escape to plan. And who knows? Maybe this time the universe will cut us a break." With that, the crew returned to their tasks, each of them driven by the shared knowledge that their fight was far from over. They were battered, bruised, and running on borrowed time, but they were alive. And in the dark, unforgiving depths of space, that was all that mattered. The holo display flickered with an angry blue light, casting ominous shadows across the dimly lit bridge of the radiant dawn. Tersh looked around at his motley crew, each member battered, bruised, and somehow still standing. It felt like the first time in ages they'd been on the same page, and not just trying to keep the ship from swallowing them whole. "All right, people, we've got the alien signals dancing to our tune. Now let's make sure they keep singing the right song," Tersh said, leaning heavily against the console, the synthetic coffee from earlier now a cold, bitter memory. Vex was already fiddling with the display, his fingers a blur. "I've set up a loopback on those signals. If they do try to double-check, they'll just see us flexing our divine muscles." "Good," Tersh replied, a crooked grin tugging at his lips. "Wouldn't want them realizing we're just a bunch of idiots with a laser pointer." Shelby's voice crackled over the comms, punctuated by the occasional clank and hiss from the engine room. "Engines are stable for now, but don't push it or we'll be floating home in escape pods." "Noted," Tersh said dryly. "Leora, how's that Superlaser self-destruct looking?" Leora glanced up from her data pad, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and fear. "Ready to go on your command. It'll be a cosmic fireworks show they won't forget. Assuming we survive to critique it," Nikto added, ever the realist with a penchant for grim predictions. "Well, if we don't, at least we'll die as legends in their mythology," Vex quipped, adjusting his chair as if preparing for a long, leisurely afternoon. "The gods who blew themselves up has a nice ring to it." Davix, still sweating guilt like a leaking faucet, was desperately working to ensure the systems wouldn't betray them again. "I'm patching up the last of the sabotage. Just a few more tweaks and we'll be running smoother than a politician's promise." "Let's not get carried away," Shelby replied, a hint of laughter in her voice. "We all know Tersh's promises are more reliable than the ship's plumbing." A momentary silence followed, filled with the hum of machinery and the distant groan of the radiant dawn protesting its own existence. For Tersh, it was the calm before the storm they'd been bracing for, before they had to plunge headlong into the unknown again. "This is it," Tersh said, more to himself than anyone else. "Time to show these aliens what a little human ingenuity looks like. Leora, start the countdown." The holo display flared with activity as Leora's fingers danced over her data pad. "Starting countdown. 3, 2, 1. The Superlaser emitted a low, resonant thrum, a sound that resonated through the bones and made the ship shiver like it was desperately trying to shake off a hangover. The fake signals they'd crafted broadcasted out into the cosmos, a symphony of holographic deception. Tersh held his breath, watching the alien signals on the holo display. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a sudden gust of wind, the alien transmissions shifted from suspicion to what could only be described as cautious reverence. They'd bought the lie. "Well, would you look at that," Tersh said, letting out a long breath of relief. "They've swallowed our story hook, line, and starship. Yeah, but don't get too comfy. We're still sitting on a ticking time bomb," Nikto reminded them, his fingers hovering over the self-destruct control like a man about to flip the switch on a toaster with a death wish. "Just wait for the right moment," Tersh instructed, keeping his voice steady even if his heart was doing the cha-cha. The crew watched the holo display, the alien signals now ebbing, retreating like a tide that was not quite sure whether to advance or recede. It was a gamble, and they all knew it. A few more minutes and the Superlaser would be history, along with any chance of the aliens using it against them, or realizing the humans weren't celestial beings clad in starlight and pure power. "Leora, self-destruct now," Tersh commanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife through synthetic butter. "Executing," Leora replied, her voice a mix of grim resolve and a touch of glee. She pressed the button and the countdown began. The ship vibrated violently, sending a sharp tremor through the floor, and then the Superlaser exploded in a blaze of light and energy that outshone even the distant stars. The bridge rocked, alarms blaring briefly before they were deftly silenced by Vex's quick action. "That'll give them something to ponder," Vex said, leaning back as though he'd just completed a particularly satisfying round of target practice. "All right, team," Tersh said, looking around at his crew, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the displays. "We managed to neutralize the threat, but we've still got a long way home. Let's get to work on that. And here I thought becoming a god was supposed to make life easier," Shelby chimed in, her voice almost lost beneath the mechanical noise of the ship. "Only if you plan on leaving a mess for someone else to clean up," Vex said. "We're gods, not janitors." Davix, still hovering near the console, looked up. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm sorry, to all of you. Apologies don't fix hull breaches or system sabotage, but they are a start," Tersh replied, the weight of the past few days etched into his words. "Let's make sure it doesn't happen again." As the remnants of the Superlaser drifted into the void, Tersh felt a strange sense of peace settle over the bridge. The immediate threat had been dealt with, and they were still standing or sitting in some cases. "All right, people, let's chart a course out of here. Vex, get us shipshape for the journey. Leora, double-check those signals. We don't want them getting any bright ideas." Shelby's voice came over the comms once more. "Engines are holding, but if they start coughing again, you might want to have a bucket handy. Keep us together, Shelby." "Just until we're in the clear," Tersh replied, a grim determination in every syllable. The crew worked with renewed vigor, each task performed with an urgency born of both survival and the slim hope of returning to something resembling normality. For the first time in what felt like forever, they were on the offensive, not merely reacting to the universe's whims. Tersh looked around, feeling a rare warmth in his chest as he watched them. For a crew that had been thrown together by chance and held together by necessity, they weren't half bad. Sure, they were a ragtag bunch with habits that could drive a saint to blasphemy, but they'd pulled through. "So, when do we get a vacation?" Vex asked, stretching in his chair like a cat claiming a sunbeam. "When we're not at risk of turning into stardust," Tersh replied, the dry humor creeping back into his voice. "Until then, we keep this ship running and hope the universe doesn't flatten us with the next asteroid." "Sounds like a plan, Cap," Nikto said, his voice a growling affirmation of their collective resolve. Tersh nodded, a small smile playing across his lips. They danced with death and lived to tell the tale. Not bad for a crew whose main qualifications were stubbornness and the ability to work miracles with duct tape. As they prepared to set course, each crew member busy with tasks, Tersh allowed himself a moment of reflection. The bridge was still a dim, cluttered mess, the ship still a precarious collection of barely functional technology, but they were alive. They'd cheated death and the alien menace with a combination of luck, skill, and sheer bloody-mindedness. "All right, let's get moving," Tersh said, standing straighter now. "We've got a long journey ahead, and I'd like to make it without any more divine interventions." The radiant dawn groaned as the engines engaged, the vibrations a symphony of impending doom and hopeful possibility. As they accelerated away from the remnants of the solar farm turned Superlaser, the crew exchanged glances, some weary, some relieved, all determined. "So, how do we celebrate not being dead gods?" Vex asked, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. "By making sure we stay that way," Tersh replied, a rough laugh in his throat. "Now get to it, people. Let's see if we can make it home without blowing up, breaking down, or pissing off any more aliens." With that, the crew returned to their tasks, their laughter and banter a comforting reminder of their shared victory. They were battered, bruised, and maybe a little wiser. But most importantly, they were alive, and for now, that was enough. The radiant dawn drifted through space, a battered tin can of a ship with more personality than functionality. It was a miracle they were still here, considering the odds were stacked higher than the bureaucratic paper pile back on Earth. Tersh leaned back in his chair, feeling the painful knot in his shoulder remind him he wasn't getting any younger. "So, let's take stock, shall we?" he mused aloud, mostly to himself but loud enough for the crew to hear. "We've managed to trick an entire alien race into thinking we're gods, destroyed a solar superlaser, and didn't get ourselves atomized in the process. Not bad for days' work. You say that like it'll look good on a resume," Shelby quipped over the comms, her voice carrying just enough static to sound like a late-night radio DJ with a half-assed signal. "But unless there's a cosmic job fair, I don't know who's hiring." Nikto swiveled in his chair, the springs squealing like a dying animal. "Well, we've got more pressing concerns. Like how long before the power reserves run out and we start playing hide and seek with the dark?" "Always the optimist, Nikto," Vex said, rolling his eyes so hard it was a miracle they didn't roll right out. "Can't we just enjoy the moment before you start talking about imminent doom?" "But where's the fun in that?" Nikto shot back, his voice dry as a desert wind. "Besides, Tersh needs something to put in his log for future generations of lunatics." "Coherent logs are optional at this point," Tersh replied. "Though I suppose someone has to record the tale of humans outsmarting aliens with nothing but a busted ship and some creative storytelling." Leora chuckled, still tapping away at her data pad. "Creative. I'd say delusional, but that's splitting hairs." "And speaking of delusions," Davix chimed in, visibly more relaxed now that his sabotage repair work was done, "those aliens. They didn't just buy our story, they're practically laying out the celestial red carpet. Nothing like a little divine intervention to smooth over interstellar relations," Shelby said. "Maybe they'll start sending us sacrificial offerings." "I could use a new pair of boots." Tersh shook his head, a bemused grin tugging at his lips. "Or they'll just wait for us to bestow more godly wisdom. Either way, let's not look this gift horse in the mouth. Especially since it's dragging us back home," Leora commented, flicking through a series of alien messages on her data pad. "They're rerouting energy our way, thinking it'll earn them eternal favor or something." "Well, they're not wrong," Vex said, kicking his feet up on the console. "It's about time someone appreciated our divine presence, even if it's all built on a pile of lies. Let's just hope the truth stays buried deeper than a politician's morals," Nikto added. "I'm not keen on finding out how forgiving they are." The holo display flickered to life, casting a pale glow over the bridge. Alien symbols danced across the screen, a language that was as much guesswork as it was interpretation. "Looks like they're sending us coordinates," Leora said, half to herself. "Probably a good idea to follow them. They're directing us away from any potential hostilities." Tersh nodded. "Keep us on that path, then. The last thing we need is to lose their favor and end up in a galactic tug-of-war." As the ship chugged along, tensions eased, replaced by a strange camaraderie born from shared hardship. They were a crew of misfits, but together they'd done the impossible. "So, what do you all think about this whole God thing?" Shelby asked, her voice carrying a hint of genuine curiosity. "It's ridiculous," Nikto said, leaning back in his chair. "But I'll take ridiculous over dead any day." "Typical human arrogance," Vex observed with a smirk. "We always want to be worshipped even if it's by accident. Let's not get too full of ourselves, Tersh interjected. Their belief is what's keeping us alive right now. But who knows how long that'll last, right? Because divinity is all about who believes in you, Davix said, more to himself than anyone else. We're just lucky the universe has a sense of humor. Tersh couldn't help but chuckle at that. If there's one thing I've learned out here, it's that the universe loves irony. The crew settled into a comfortable silence, each person lost in their thoughts as the radiant dawn hummed along on its borrowed power. It was a rare moment of peace, the kind that came after surviving a storm when the air was filled with a sense of relief and impending doom. "All right, let's get down to business," Tersh said, breaking the quiet. "Vex, keep monitoring those signals. If the aliens even think about changing their minds, I want to know." "Got it, Cap," Vex replied, fingers tapping away at the console with practiced ease. "Leora, keep us on course and update me if anything changes." "Consider it done," she responded, eyes never leaving her data pad. "Shelby, keep those engines running smoothly. I don't want to find out if space has a AAA service." "I'll do my best," Shelby replied, voice laced with amusement. "But don't expect miracles." "Miracles we've got," Tersh said with a wry smile. "It's the normal stuff that's a problem." As the crew went about their tasks, the bridge settled into the rhythm of routine, the kind of routine that came with knowing exactly how close they'd come to oblivion. Tersh sat back, absorbing the quiet chaos unfolding around him. The crew's banter was a comforting backdrop, like the hum of machinery that spoke of life above the void. "You know," Nikto said, breaking the nearly meditative state, "this feels like one of those moments that gets written down in history books. The glorious idiots who fooled the cosmos." "Yeah, but who's gonna believe it?" Vex asked, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. "It sounds like the plot of a bad holovid." "That's the beauty of it," Tersh said. "The truth is always stranger than fiction." "The truth is, we're just a bunch of fools who got lucky," Leora said, her voice tinged with both pride and disbelief. "Luck's a funny thing," Davix mused, staring at his console. "It's never around when you want it, but always shows up when you least expect it." "Or maybe we just make our own luck," Shelby added, tapping the side of the comms panel in a familiar rhythm. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, each crew member contributing to the banter with their own brand of wit. The tension of earlier seemed to dissipate, replaced by a shared sense of accomplishment. "So what's next for us?" Vex asked, leaning forward with a curious grin. "After the whole God thing, I mean." "Hopefully a return to something resembling normal," Tersh replied, though even he knew normal was a relative term out here. "And a proper meal," Nikto added, his stomach growling in agreement. "I'm getting tired of rations that taste like recycled plastic." "Can't argue with that," Shelby said. "Maybe we can convince the aliens to send us some real food. As an offering, of course." The crew laughed, the sound echoing through the bridge and mingling with the hum of the radiant dawn. It was a rare moment of levity, a reminder that even in the darkest times, humor was their greatest ally. As the minutes turned into hours, Tersh found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. It wasn't just a story of survival. It was a testament to the power of belief, even if that belief was born from deception. "All right, let's wrap it up for now," Tersh said, rising from his chair and stretching out the stiffness in his back. "We've got a long way to go, and I'd rather not get caught napping." The crew nodded, each returning to their duties with a newfound sense of purpose. They'd faced down the unknown and come out the other side stronger for it. As Tersh turned to leave the bridge, he paused, glancing back at his crew. "And one more thing, thanks for sticking together and making it through." Vex gave a lazy salute, a grin on his face. "Anytime, Cap," Leora nodded, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. "Wouldn't have it any other way." Shelby's voice came over the comms, her tone warm and playful. "You're stuck with us, Tersh, for better or worse." Nikto offered a rare, genuine smile. "We may be a bunch of misfits, but at least we're the best at what we do. Even if what we do is bluff our way through the universe," Davix added with a chuckle. Tersh shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. They might be a ragtag crew, but they were his ragtag crew, and together they could take on anything the cosmos threw their way. As he stepped off the bridge, the ship continued its journey through the endless expanse of space, a small, defiant beacon in the great unknown. They'd shown the universe what humanity was capable of, and as they made their way home, Tersh knew they'd be ready for whatever came next. In the end, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving, carving out their own story in the vast tapestry of the cosmos. And if the universe ever decided to throw another curveball their way, well, they'd be ready to hit it out of the park with their own brand of human ingenuity and stubbornness.